Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. So Canadian publisher Page Two found their publishing niche early on. They honed it to perfection, and they've had great success since then. It's always helpful to learn from other publisher stories to improve your own publishing business. So Page Two co-founder and co-CEO Trena White joins the podcast today to share details about how their team discovered the best books for their business, how they build strong relationships with their authors, how they built their staff, and much more. Welcome, Trena. How are you?
Hi, thanks so much, Christopher. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so basically I want to go through y'all's journey, and we can then, as other publishers listening, they can learn about, what worked for you. And so then they can be like, maybe that'll work for us too. All right, so let's start at the beginning. How did Page Two come to be? Like what year and what was the original concept?
Yeah, we launched, when I say we, I mean with my co-founder and co-CEO, Jesse Finkelstein. We launched Page Two in 2013. We are a hybrid publisher, but Jesse and I had both worked in the traditional publishing side for many years. I had worked previously at a company called McClellan and Stewart, which was Canada's oldest independent publisher. And Jesse had worked at Raincoast Books and some other companies. And together we had been working at Douglas and McIntyre, which was at that time Canada's largest independent book publisher, 40-year-old company with a few different imprints. And I had been made publisher there, and she had been made COO, and that's where we met as colleagues. Eventually, D&M entered creditor protection, and the assets were sold off, and we and all of our colleagues found ourselves unemployed. So out of this, dramatic time, she and I found ourselves in a position of being able to build something together. So we knew publishing was our passion. It was an industry we were deeply committed to. We did not want to leave book publishing. And we also wanted to try something a little bit different, in part because of the experience we had been through, but also we had relationships with some authors who were very entrepreneurial, subject matter experts, writing nonfiction books on areas related to their businesses. And we were hearing from these authors that they really wished that there were an alternative way to publish. So something between self-publishing and traditional publishing that would give them a lot more input into the way their books were produced to ensure they align with their businesses, a lot more leeway with marketing and sales and branding and these kinds of things. And so after meeting with many authors and other business advisors from different industries, we decided to launch Page Two. And it didn't look how it looks now. We didn't call ourselves a hybrid publisher at the time. It wasn't really, that was a category that was just getting started. It wasn't really a thing at the time. There was sort of a wild west of publishing services companies. And the premise of our company was to support entrepreneurs and subject matter experts who wanted really powerful books that were going to have a serious impact on them and their businesses and their readers over the long term. Publishing books that were indistinguishable from what you would see by a big five publisher, for instance, in terms of quality of design and editing. And so we started out as a publishing services company. You could hire us to do consulting on your gnarly publishing challenges. We would guide people to different publishing paths. We would broker deals with authors and distributors. And then over time, we realized, the type of author we're supporting doesn't actually want to be DIY about their book publishing. They just want to do it right. And so we evolved to become a full hybrid publisher where authors invest in their books, and we have the same kind of infrastructure that a major publisher would have, with distribution by Macmillan in the US and internationally, Raincoast in Canada, a team now of 23 people, wonderful experienced freelancers and contractors. And so now we do call ourselves a boutique hybrid publishing company, but it wasn't always that way.
Yeah. Well, and how many books do y'all publish now per year?
Yeah, we publish about 50 to 55 books a year, which is actually quite a small list for a hybrid publisher. A lot of hybrid publishers are publishing, hundreds and hundreds of books a year, but we have a very focused niche. And we've really leaned into that, business and leadership books, books on coaching, marketing, sales, relationships, parenting, self-help. So very much practical nonfiction by leading experts in their fields. And so we've stayed committed to that specific niche and really leaned into it and have carved out a reputation as a result for excellence in these categories. I think in the hybrid space, often you see companies doing a bit of everything, and we've gone in the other direction of really aiming to be specialists.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I want to ask you about is that concept of when you initially were publishing your books, you didn't necessarily have what is now your focus. So I'm interested when did that happen, that moment where you were like, oh, this is what we should be doing. We're really good at this and this works well for us. So where was that revelation?
To be honest, the focus wasn't that far away from where we are now when we launched 12 years ago. Jesse and I remember actually walking in the woods in Stanley Park in Vancouver one day as we were planning the business and really thinking, who are we for? And we kept coming back to entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches, people who need a book as part of their business. Because what we had been hearing from some of those authors is that they wanted more control over their IP. And, the book for them was a key sort of tool or a key element in their business ecosystem that would help them grow their business and needed to be published in alignment with everything else they do. So we had that in mind from the beginning. It's just what's changed is it was harder for us to find those people at the beginning because we didn't have a reputation for publishing in that area. Mm-hmm. So it took time to establish credibility as a publisher in those categories. It took authors taking a chance on us, really. And one of our very first authors was actually somebody that I had worked with at McClellan and Stewart years earlier, who had been contracted to write a second book with the company, and then they decided to cancel the contract for some reason. And he called us kind of in a panic saying, oh my gosh, what do? I really need this book. For my business, it's just critical to my speaking and everything else I'm doing. And so we took that book on and handled the editing and saw it through all of the stages of production and got him distribution and so on. And it ended up being a Canadian bestseller. There was a credit union that bought several thousand copies, and it was a success. So that was the beginning of unlocking kind of the focus and establishing our credibility, because that particular author was very connected to other speakers and authors and other entrepreneurs, and started to make introductions. And then that's how we built the company. It was really about our authors talking about us to their colleagues and their peers, and about word of mouth spread.
Yeah. There are a lot of people out there that are possibly subject matter experts or leaders in a business, sense. So, someone who's coming at this and thinking, okay, well, that's, the type of thing I want to do, and or just in general, like they're just looking for their niche. Like I'm interested, like, how do you know? Like, what's your like secret sauce when you're looking for this type of, potential book that makes you go, that's a page two book? Because again, you all have
Mhm.
had success. So I'm just kind of interested in like how you're picking and choosing which you do and do not, pursue as actual books.
Yeah, well, I think, Christopher, in a lot of ways, our editorial mandate isn't so different from what most, from what any publisher would have. We're looking for books that have a unique angle, where they are filling a gap in the market. We look at competitive titles and where this potential book would fit in. We're looking for authors who are very established, credible authorities on their topic and already recognized on that topic. We're looking for authors who can write a strong manuscript, even if they require intensive support, because most of them are not professional writers,
Mhm.
um, who have a perspective that really, warrants a wider exploration. And we're looking for people who have I'll use the word again, the business ecosystem to support the book's release. Because with this kind of nonfiction, it is platform driven nonfiction. We find the books that are the most successful tend to be by authors who are actively out delivering keynote speeches on the topic, or have built a large email newsletter list on the topic, or offer training programs on the topic. They have a number of other pillars that the book relates to. It's not a book that's being published in isolation.
Mhm.
That's really the marketing that really makes a difference to these books getting momentum. So it's a critical part of what we look for as well.
Yeah, well, I'm interested also, yeah, in that concept. I mean, and like you were saying, I'm assuming that, so you get a referral from someone that you all trust, and they trust you, they've worked with you, and they say, I think this person would be great. So you think they're a good fit. But yeah, it's interesting that you're right, they're not going to necessarily be a great writer. So how does that process work in terms of, you having like your team work with them on the concept? I mean, do
Mhm.
they do an outline? Do you do the outline for them? Ghostwriters involved? Like what is that process?
Yeah, and so we offer a wide range of support, but the very first step, if an author is interested in working with us, is that we ask them to complete this submission form on our website. And it's very detailed, and it's deliberately so. We are really trying to encourage writers to think through their concept very carefully before we engage in a conversation with them. So we ask for things like, what is the challenge that your book solves for your readers? What are the top 5 key messages readers would be taking away? What are the comp titles? Basically, thinking through the book's positioning, and then they can also deliver samples if they have started to write the manuscript. And then if we do end up working with them, we have a number of really skillful developmental editors who will actually help to shape the outline with the author. So we don't require them to submit a full, 50-page book proposal necessarily, although we're always happy to get those. Um, Instead, for some of our authors, they'll really know what the topic is because they've been delivering talks on it for several years, and they have all of the stories and the content, but they need a professional support in shaping that into book format. So we have different ways that we will work with authors. One is an 8-week process where we'll actually work with them to outline the book, figure out exactly what stories and what messages go in each chapter and how the chapters flow from one to the next. And then we also do have ghostwriters we'll bring in to support the authors if they need that level of support. I find most of them prefer to write it themselves, but some need a lot more sort of editorial scaffolding than others.
Yeah, well, since we're talking about the authors, I know something that you all pride yourselves on is the author-publisher relationship. So I'm interested in what are some tips you have for other publishers about helping to strengthen that relationship, things you've done that have worked really well for you all.
Yeah. For us, one of our guiding principles with our authors from the beginning has been transparency. Um, and we really believe that the author and publisher are partners, and the book ends up being better if we can share as much sort of market intelligence and on their end and sort of publishing intelligence on our end to develop the book. So what that means for us is we share all kinds of information with our authors that wouldn't normally be part of the publishing process, or at least wasn't in my previous jobs in publishing. So we talk with them about the print runs. We get their input on print runs because they're the ones who know how many speeches they have coming up next year and can estimate how many books they might sell at those speeches. Um, we meet with them to develop our approach and our strategies for every phase of the process. So, for instance, we meet our design team meets with our authors, and we have a design strategy meeting to talk about the cover design. And in that meeting, we get their input on things like their visual identity and their brand, so that we can consider that as we're also considering how to design the best possible cover for that topic and for that category. So it's really about kind of giving them a lot of say and also sharing a lot of information and more than might be typical. So that they're really, really integrated into the whole process. That's been a huge part of it.
Well, very cool. And then I know that you also do some like educational sessions you've mentioned where,
I
uh,
do.
so what are those, like, what are the subject matters and then how do you set them up?
Yeah.
Like virtual or something?
Yeah. So, what our marketing team has been doing is running what they call super learning sessions, where all page two authors are invited to join. We'll usually have a guest speaker come in and do an hour long webinar with our marketing team on things like we just did a 3-part series on making the most of LinkedIn. Um, we have done them on things like uh, turning your book into a keynote, sort of book to speech. And so our authors come, they get to hear from experts on these topics that will make a meaningful difference to their book. And they also have a chance to meet with other page two authors. And I think they really value that part of it. We've really tried to cultivate a feeling of community among our authors. Um, and what we've actually found is so many of our authors they will connect with one another over LinkedIn. They'll just introduce themselves to one another. There's sort of a feeling of being in the page two family, and and so, as we've really identified that there's this thriving community, we've tried to find ways to be more intentional about growing that. And so, in addition to the super learning sessions, we just this year have started running what we're calling page two author salons. We held our first one in New York in May, where we invited all of our New York area authors to come, and my co-founder Jesse was there, our sales director, one of our editors, and then a number of our authors came, and we hosted a salon where they had an opportunity to talk about challenges they've been facing related to their book, ideas they had. They had a chance to network and meet other authors, and so it's about helping them feel less isolated in the writing and publishing process and really feel like they have a community of support around them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, so you were mentioning about how that other group of people didn't have the bandwidth. What I'm interested in,
Yeah.
you all started as 2 people, but you have grown to over 20. So how did you grow your team? Like, who was the first person that you were like, beyond you two, we need this role, and then we need this role. I think there are a lot of publishers who are trying to grow, and they're trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. So Jesse and I did everything from the beginning, and we did hire freelancers. I had an editorial background, so when we first started, I was actually handling our substantive editing myself,
Mm.
and eventually that just became untenable. So we started to outsource the work to freelancers. Then eventually we reached a point where we felt we needed a project manager. That was actually the very first role we created. It was somebody who could handle, sort of like a managing editor, somebody who could, handle the flow of the assets, maintain the schedule, deal with the printers and all of that. And that significantly lightened our load so that we could focus more on things like business growth and strategy and sales and marketing and so on. Then we ended up hiring as our creative director Peter Cocking, who was a colleague of ours from Douglas and McIntyre when we had worked there. He'd won many, many, many awards for book design, and just somebody we respected enormously. So we hired him very early on. And then the person who is now our COO, Gabby Narstead, she was our very first intern ever at Page Two.
Wow.
So she interned with us from the Master Publishing program at Simon Fraser University, maybe in our second year. And then we hired her as soon as we could and have just promoted her until now. She's running the company internally for the most part. So what we've done is we've just tried to find the most talented people we could, people we really respected, people who really, are deeply passionate about books, people who are real craftspeople and really, take great pride in their work. And then we've just scaled from there. Hiring people in sales and marketing and editors and so long along the way. For us, part of it has also been there would reach a certain point where our freelance costs were exceeding what a salary might be in various areas. And that for us was often a cue that it might be time to bring somebody on a salary basis.
Yeah.
So a lot of our people started with us as contractors or freelancers, and then we would roll them over to employment agreements.
Yeah, that's what something I was wondering, because there are a lot of people out there that would love to hire a staff, but they're like, where do I find the budget? But it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
in some ways it's like, well, it's out of necessity because you're actually going to save money then by having a staff member do it.
Yeah, that's right. And we only did it as the budget allowed.
Mhm.
Once sort of as we reached different stages of growth, it just became clear we almost couldn't manage anymore without hiring people to do the work.
So I'm also interested in then kind of like your business model. We talked about you being a hybrid publisher. So sometimes there will be like someone who will do a full publishing packages, everything included, but they'll also then have some businesses that a la carte services. So just you can just get editorial services or book marketing. So how did you all set up your business, and why do you do it that way?
Yeah, well, in the very beginning, people could hire us for different services, like just editorial services or editing and design or whatever. But eventually, we realized that it was a much more streamlined experience for us and for the authors if we could have a skillful team that was used to working together,
Mm.
handle everything from beginning to end.
Mm.
So we stopped offering individual services in that way. Um, and it was just realizing our authors just wanted us to get it done for them and to get it done really well. So they prefer to just hire us for a full package
Mm.
to see it through from beginning to end, for the most part. But I really think even for traditional publishers, this kind of custom publishing is an interesting option and a way to bring in additional revenue. So as I said, Douglas and McIntyre had been doing it was fee for service publishing that Douglas and McIntyre had been doing for these institutions. And I know of a lot of traditional publishers that have, fee for service custom publishing that they do quietly on the side. Some less quietly than others, but it seems to be becoming more and more common. I'm also aware of some major publishers who require their authors to buy a certain number of copies of their books in their publishing contracts. They're not hybrid publishers, but to me, that kind of contract starts to blur the lines quite a bit between what's hybrid and what's traditional, because effectively the authors then investing in their work and subsidizing the publishing support in some way.
Yeah, sure.
So for us, it's just a very transparent fee for service basis, and then the authors on the back end receive a much higher than normal percentage of the royalties.
Sure, yeah. Well, and you mentioned about distribution. So, I mean, a lot of publishers out there are trying to land traditional distribution. They have difficulty getting it. So I'm interested in, at what point did you all get it? And then how did you decide, well, we should get it? Because sometimes then there are publishers that land it and then it doesn't work for them. And they're like, you know what, this wasn't a good fit, but it seems like it is a good fit for you all. So I'm just interested in that whole process.
Yeah, the distribution is such an interesting thing. It is a real challenge to land distribution deals for sure. We first decided to go for a traditional distribution agreement when we decided to produce our own book for the first time. If you remember, I don't know, 10 years ago, there was a big craze with Pokemon Go, the Pokemon Go game. Yeah. We decided to publish an unofficial Pokemon Go guide. And we knew that we would need mass distribution for it. And Jessie had previously worked at Raincoast Books, which is one of Canada's largest book distributors. She had worked there during the Harry Potter days when they were the publisher of Harry Potter. And eventually they closed down their publishing division and just leaned into distribution. So she had long-standing relationships at Raincoast Books. And so we went to them with the Pokemon Go idea, but then also painted a vision for a future publishing program, thinking that we would like to bring the kinds of books that we were publishing, we would like to bring them into the trade. And so they gave us a distribution agreement, and then Publishers Group West also agreed to give us a U.S. and international distribution agreement. So it started with that one book, but also a vision for a longer, a much broader publishing program than that.
Yeah.
And now we have since left PGW in the States, and now we're with Macmillan there.
Yeah. So I'm interested in also in your book marketing packages. So it's part of the package, but then like, what do you all offer? What are you doing for each book that you kind of, if you will, guarantee that this is what's included?
It really, the marketing really depends on the author's needs. So because so many of our authors have significant platforms, a lot of what we do is develop marketing strategy with them for how they're going to make the most of the book with their existing audience and use their audience to build the book. And then on top of that, we do offer a number of different marketing services, like, running digital ad campaigns, whether it's on Meta or Amazon. We run various types of PR campaigns. We do a lot of work around trade marketing, making the most of the industry tools like Edelweiss and so on. And so a variety of different at different things depending on what the author's needs are, because many of our authors already have either people supporting them on the marketing, or they're really savvy marketers already for their business. And it's really about figuring out how to roll the book into that.
Interesting. Okay. And then I know that you all started in 2013, so I'm kind of interested. Are there anything in general with like the industry that's changed during that time that you had to adjust to? At one point, you and I talked
Mm-hmm.
about audiobooks being something that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
really boomed during that time.
Yeah, I mean, audiobooks weren't really a, they weren't really a thing when we launched, and now obviously, they're it's a growing market, and we release most of our books in audio simultaneously with the print book and the ebook. So that has been a big change. What we did on that was to partner with a really skillful audiobook production company called Twin Flames. So they handle all of our audiobook production, and they do a great job either directing our authors, or we'll bring in voice actors. And then our audiobooks are distributed by Macmillan when we're selling the book into the trade, because we do have another distribution stream where we sell books online only. But audiobooks definitely were one of the big things that we've had to adapt to. And then there have just been some wild rides in the industry over the last decade. COVID, obviously, everybody, that was just an intensely stressful time, as we all had to pivot in our businesses in various ways in 2020 and 2021. This year, the threat of tariffs has been hanging over the industry, so I feel like it's ever changing. And definitely we just keep growing and evolving and responding to the changes the best that we can.
Yeah, well, just to mention, IBPA has a member benefit with Twin Flame Studios. So people that do production with them get a discount. So just throwing that out
Right.
there. And but if you're not
That's
taking
great. They're
advantage,
fantastic. They're
yeah, yeah.
amazing at what they do.
And you mentioned the tariffs. I am interested. You all are Canadian publishers, so then
Mhm.
how has that affected you in terms of like, getting into the U.S. market, and how have you adjusted?
Well, on the tariff specifically, in the end, it hasn't affected us,
Oh,
because books are exempt from tariffs.
mm,
But it was pretty dicey for a few months. It wasn't clear, what the tariffs would mean exactly and how we would be affected. But so far, so good. In terms of being a Canadian publisher growing into the US in general, though, um, it's for us. First of all, many of our authors are American. So about
mm,
60% of our authors now are based in the States. So their primary market, it tends to be American. So in a way, we really see North America as our market. And I think that's the case for a lot of Canadian publishers if they're publishing books that aren't too, Canada specific.
mm.
Most, 99% of our books are not Canada specific.
Mm.
And so we really see North America and beyond as the market. And the Canadian, Canada is just so small. Most publishers here have to think that way. You have to really try to think about how to get your books into the US market and beyond in order to be viable.
Well, so I'm interested, we were talking a lot about like success stories. So
Mhm.
before we finish out, I'm interested in some of the challenges that you all have faced. Is there anything kind of over the time that you've gone through that really faced a challenge? Like for example, like a lot of publishers at one point sold a lot of books in bookstores, and then some of those started closing down, perhaps, and then there's more and more like kind of like whatever, like just like Barnes and Noble or something. And so I'm wondering, is there any kind of like big thing like that that you all faced, and then but you found a way to overcome it?
Mhm. It's a good question. To me, that our big challenges have been less of that type and
Hmm.
more about the challenges of fast growth. to go from 2 people to, a team of 23, it's been an entrepreneurial challenge. It's required changing all kinds of systems and communication tools, and just a different level of connectivity throughout the company. And that's been made more challenging with hybrid work. We're now working hybrid. And so when I think of our challenges, I think of them as sort of the internal challenges first and foremost. Finding the right people, for these jobs that don't always have an equivalent in the industry. In particular, finding new skillful people with book experience who also can be quite flexible, because our model is so different from what they might be used to. So those are the things that I think of as our ongoing challenges.
Yeah. And so then when you were talking about like communication, what do you mean in terms of, is it like the types of like platforms that you all are using as a publisher, like, to like keep track of your production or your title management? Is it like that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I think when you grow, it's your systems have to scale with you. And so, yeah, exactly. When we started, we would just use spreadsheets for everything. And then that's fine if you're publishing 8 books a year, but there's a point where, you're publishing, 40 and 50, and what used to work at a small scale is no longer viable, and you have to upgrade your systems. And so we've invested a lot in things like, we now use Biblio for our metadata, for instance. We've switched to Metacomet for our author royalties. We've changed accounting software. We've just had to make a lot of systems upgrades internally in order to keep pace with the size of our team and the size of our program.
Yeah. Well, and I'll mention IBPA does have a Metacomet discount as well for members. So,
Christopher, I don't know if we're taking advantage of these, so I'm making a note right now to
I'm trying to save you money, Trina.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I totally hear you. I think that that's something that people aren't, thinking as much about is that concept. It's the internal stuff where you're, and then of course with every new system, it's, more money. Like if you, like you were saying, if you're using an Excel spreadsheet for royalties or something, and then suddenly you switch to a system, it's so much more effective and so much cleaner to do it. But then of course you're like, well, but it costs a subscription every month or whatever. So I can only imagine,
exactly.
changing that. And then also I can only imagine learning how to do that new system, like training your team.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And then the time it takes to research it and to set it up and kind of onboard everybody into it. Fortunately, our COO handles those kinds of things, but those are real challenges. And it's, nobody gets into publishing wanting to deal with systems. Well, maybe they do. I guess the systems people do, but I guess what we have done to overcome that is to find the right people with the right brains, like Gabby, who can really think it through and make sure that everything is connecting properly so that we can run efficiently and effectively.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I know, so I'm an author, and like kind of the running joke is, as an author, you think more about, you just want to focus on the writing. But of course, you need to focus on marketing. And if you're, doing an author publisher route, how you publish. Well, same thing with a publisher. You all love publishing books. Ideally, you could spend all your time designing book covers, editing the books, finding new. But yeah, you have to then be like, oh, well, we're a business and we need to make sure that we're paying our authors. And so you're right that you are having to learn all these skill sets. And ideally, you can grow to the point where you hire someone and you're like, hey, you're not a publisher. Like that's your thing. You just focus on the money,
That's right.
whatever.
That's right. And that's what we've done. We created two different leadership teams actually over the last couple of years. One a team of managers, so we have a production director now, marketing director, and so on throughout the company, and then also an executive team that includes Jesse, Gabby, and our CFO and me. And so, in other words, putting the right people in place to really problem solve their respective area to make sure we're at the cutting edge of whatever's happening in their respective area. That's been one of the smartest things that we have done recently, really getting the right people in the right place.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, you've clearly had a lot of success, so congratulations on that. I mean, we both know a lot of people start indie publishing companies, and it's not necessarily an easy and or lucrative thing for some, and they have to they shut down. So, congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So yeah. We are grateful to have you all as members. We're grateful that you all, right now sharing your experience to help other publishers. So really, thank you. And I hope you can focus more on publishing going forward. We'll find.
Oh yeah, we're always focused on publishing.
Yeah.
That's that's the fun stuff.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, Trina, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. This is some really great information. I know others are going to listen to this and be able to take it back to their own teams and talk about it. So thank you. I also want to make sure people go to page2.com, check out all your amazing books. Again, there's some really great stuff on there. They've been very successful. So check that out. Any last words you want to say before we shut out?
Just thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It was fun to talk about, where we've come from.
Yeah, well, I hope everybody also, we mentioned a few of our benefits, so definitely look into IBPA membership. It's ibpa-online.org. And then I hope you listen to this podcast. It's the last Thursday of every month that it drops. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere you get your downloads for podcasts. Thank you again, Trina, and thank everybody for listening. Really appreciate it.